Kia ora and welcome back. This is chapter 28 of the book entitled, or the learning resource entitled, The Future of Learning. In this section we're going to be looking at the learning areas, and the learning areas typically and historically have been things like mathematics, science, English or the language of origin in there as well, social sciences, health and well-being, etc. And we've got these 7 domains, and those domains have been largely historical. We've gradually worked our way into the science world and sort of said, yes, science is important, maths is important, English is important, etc. Health and well-being, that's now important as well. And we've gradually expanded that process. So we've got 7 domains. What we have done is we've looked at each of those domains, and we took a series of curriculum from around the world, 23 different curricula from around the world, and we looked at the commonality in those 23 curriculum documents. And we said, what are the common features that they're all looking at? And most of them, of course, are content orientated, but there's some concepts mixed in there as well. So it's a real mix and a mashup of elements. But what we wanted to do was to have the same process for each curriculum area. And so what we did was we looked at science, for example, and said, let's unpack science into its fundamental concepts. Things like cause and effect. Now, cause and effect can expand into social science and a whole range of other places, but in particular in science, we do tend to take a lot of time looking at causes and for the effects that we observe. The scientific process, we wanted to have a look at what are the principles of science. And then we want to look at the individual nuances associated with geology, with physics, with chemistry, and with biology. And so what we've done is mapped the concept frameworks for the 7 different domains of learning. And when we've mapped those, we've mapped them and unpacked the concept framework into 5 different levels. So we begin with starting out, okay? Then we build our understanding. Then we start making connections. Then we start building more deeply the understanding that underlies that. And then if we've done that at level 5, we can start making predictions. We can predict with confidence. And in each case, we've actually then put underneath those a statement, which is a concept framework unpacked into its individual concepts. So we've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stages of development, starting with starting out and finishing with predicting with confidence. And we've identified the developmental schema for those and written them as concepts. Underneath that, we've set out the learning intentions. And the learning intentions is how we're going to express that concept to the learners. And what we decided was that they didn't have to be necessarily concepts, because sometimes the complexity of relating the variables overwhelms a child. But the educator needs to be aware of what that actual concept is we want them to understand. But the educator will eventually, with the language they build through the course of that process, will allow them to develop that understanding. Now here's what's really important. What we found was when we did this, and when we started using this in schools around the world, what we discovered was that the teacher actually got through, or the educator-learner I should say, the learner-educator got through the process of a concept in a remarkably short space of time. So they would do one of the concepts in an afternoon or a morning, comfortably, and do that in the afternoon or the morning of any day. Historically, we've got this headspace that units of work need to be 3, 4, 5, 10 weeks long. But what happened in this case is that the teacher, the educator-learner, looked at the concept and thought, I could teach that in the morning. I could actually get my young people to understand that by using a prompt to stimulate their curiosity, to get them to go and actually gather the information and then bring that back as stage 1. Then we'd say to them, right, go away again and do the same process again, but this time look at different contexts. Choose a context you think might be interesting around this, and then bring that back. And so the educator-learner would start the process and kick it off. But from that point onwards, essentially, the learners are going out and doing the research process themselves. They're following the learning process, and they're applying it to one context to begin with, so they get an idea about what they're talking about. But after building a number of different contexts, they start to develop an understanding of that, a conceptual understanding. And that's a different thing altogether. But what they found was that took, roughly speaking, about 2 to 2.5 hours for each of these concepts. So we can work through the concepts really quickly. So the historical notion of a curriculum of the 7 subject areas doesn't take the whole year, right? What we wanted to do through this process is liberate time so that teachers were not frenetically running from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. We wanted them to relax a bit. We wanted them to actually allow the learners to take agency over their world and do that much more efficiently. And so moving away from a topic-based approach to learning to a concept approach to learning took a 3 or 4 week unit of work and compressed it literally into a morning. It was stunning. And therefore it gave us the time to then look at things like the competencies. We've got so much time left over in some cases that if we look at the Stonefields example again with Sarah there and the team with Chris and co, what they were doing there was they were then saying, well, we'll put a half day aside where kids can just indulge in their passions. What are they passionate about? What do they want to learn about that they'll always be curious about? And let them do that in their own time. And that extended then to an afternoon and a morning. And we've got some schools now that are doing 3 sessions per week where the children, the learner, educators, are actually working amongst themselves and building their capacity around things they are interested in, their passion. And that's extraordinary. That, the kids would want to learn. But now they understand the learning process. Now they've got a degree of competency, they can actually achieve that. And the number of discipline problems just almost disappears. Not entirely. There'll always be issues in schools or young people. Wherever you put a large number of people together, there'll be issues. But what this did was it compressed the amount of time we take to actually build understanding around the different domains, the 7 different domains. We've unpacked the science curriculum as an example in this resource for you here. The whole resource is another massive resource again, which you can once again access from the website. So you can go and go online and purchase that if you wish to purchase the concept curriculum. And what we're going to deal with in the next chapter is the same kind of framework for competencies, but we've adapted that a little bit, and we'll come back to that soon. So go and have a read of the chapter here. Go through and have a look at the science example, and you'll see that in each of the concepts that have been mapped across from starting out through to predicting with confidence, each of those is a concept that contains 2 or more variables that relate to each other. Thanks very much, and we'll see you soon in chapter 29.